Some big news today coming out of the Chicago Huntsmen camp as they've officially announced Dashie will be joining their starting lineup moving into the 2021 season for Cold War. I think it was Clayster who tweeted out a few days ago the image of the dominoes starting to fall in terms of this offseason, what roster change, what moves we're going to start to see, and it is in fact starting to develop. As I know, only moves are going to continue, and this just happens to be one of the first. Now, this move in specific, we have talked on this so many times. I mean, this might be the third or fourth time that I have brought this up and actually talked on this move specifically. There was a few times at the start of the season. We talked about it through the middle of the season. When Gunless was being benched, that was kind of a big rumor, was like, hey, could Dashie fill in for the team? He and Slasher don't really seem to be getting along on the Optic Gaming roster. And so while I do want to talk about this move, I want to talk specifically, though, on whether or not Dashie is the right fit for the Chicago Huntsmen. Because we talk about all the restricted free agents that are out there, right? I mean, there's 60 plus free agents that are out there. And Huntsmen, if you're Chicago, right, you were looked upon as the team in the CDL. You can have your pick, right? You got Scump, you've got Formal, you've got Envoy, you've got those three guys. Anybody would want to play for those players or play alongside those players, as well as play for the brand in Chicago Huntsmen / Energy. So again, I feel like this move, we've talked on it a number of different times, but now that it's officially happened, and now that we're in 4v4, I want to get into the details of it, because the bullet points, right? The bullet points for Dashie now after his Optic Gaming tenure aren't positive, right? I mean, think about all of the things, all of the little notes that you gave about Dashie after his Black Ops 4 season, right? Dominant player, led the team, had some solid finishes, at one point looked like the best player in the world, definite top 3 player in the entirety of the game. I mean, positive after positive after positive. You could throw a few things here and there, but in general, the guy was a beast in Black Ops 4. And then if you look at the same bullet points, now after Modern Warfare, it's the exact opposite, right? A number of different critiques about himself as a teammate, a number of different critiques about his work ethic, a number of different critiques about his KDs and his stats throughout the year, right? The fact that Dashie did not play at Champs is unbelievable still to me. And it's not unbelievable for the decision that Optic Gaming made. I'm not saying that, but it's crazy to me to think that 1 year ago at Champs, in comparison to now what we see at this year's Champs, that Dashie was not playing. So again, is he the right fit for the Chicago Huntsmen? And when we look back at Modern Warfare, right, Kenny had kind of went on the record as of recently talking on this team and the way that he and Dashie kind of meshed together. And I'll be honest, didn't have a ton of positives to say. And I have to say, I really enjoyed that video, that stream clip that Kenny did release, because I think it was very well thought out. He gave a lot of great opinions, gave his perspective on the team, and it all seemed very genuine and very honest. And I really liked that a lot. So the reason for me why Optic Gaming's year did not go the way as planned was a lot and in part due to Dashie, right? I mean, just in general, you talk about this team, you talk about the composition that they had. I mean, it wasn't just Maven, it was myself as well who said it. This looks like the scariest team in the CDL. That roster on paper, to me, looked like one of the scariest rosters in Call of Duty history, right? And for them to finish the way that they did, for them to make a number of different roster changes, to have to implement substitutes toward the end of the season, it was crazy, right? This team should have been competing for titles every weekend, right? Every single event that we had. I was thinking about the LAN performance that I realized, that's right, we went to online. But still, they should have been competing for every single home series. They should have been a top 3, top 4 team throughout the entirety of the year. And dare I say, top 2, right? This should have been a guaranteed roster in the finals all the time. And they weren't that. And the reason for why I feel that was the case was because of Dashie. And honestly, it was because of the way that this team formed off the start. And again, Kenny, in that video that he talks on Dashie, he gave confirmation of something that we had thought about for a very long time, which was this idea that this was not the first location that Dashie wanted to be, right? He wanted to go with Scump over to the Chicago Huntsmen, over with Energy, over with Hecz, et cetera, et cetera. And so when he joins this team, the problem that occurs is that the entire roster is aware Dashie wanted to be on the Huntsmen, right? And it's not just any other team, right? It is your direct competitor, because you are looking at old Optic versus new Optic. He wants to be on our rival roster, He wanted to be with that group instead of this group. And that, for me, instantly showcased this roster isn't going to work. And it clearly didn't, right? When we talk about Dashie's personality type, and we talk about Slasher's personality type, totally different, right? This roster has been labeled as Slasher's optic, and he runs a tight ship, right? I think I've talked about that before. He runs a tight ship, and Dashie isn't really, at least in terms of personality, isn't on that same wavelength, right? If you're looking at people who mesh, people who would be friends, I'm talking in-game, it just doesn't mesh well, right? And so I think in terms of the reason why the optic roster did not work was because of personality clashes. It was because of the way that they got started off. And I think it had a lot to do with the game and the transition from LAN to online, a number of different factors, but it was because of the personality clashes within the team. And the way they started off was not great. Kenny went on in the video to talk on how he had a personal conversation with Muttdog and Dashie and said, hey, I want you to be the star, right? I want you to be the guy. And that is high praise from someone in Kenny, who I believe is one of the best players in Call of Duty today, for him to go to Dashie and realize the talent that he has and to say, you know what, you are going to lead us, right? So they gave him his position, right? He wanted to be the main AR, according to what Kenny said. He goes from an AR back to a flex, back to a main AR. I mean, a number of different position changes, then to an MP5, etc. And it doesn't work, right? The roster has some amazing moments at times. The roster falls flat on their face. They make roster changes. Dashie doesn't play at champs. And they bring in Draza and Hollow, and they try to make the best out of what has been a very underwhelming season for this Optic Gaming team. And so now that Dashie is coming on here to the Huntsmen, in terms of the way that this roster works, I actually like it, right? In terms of, is he the right fit for the Huntsmen, considering the way that the Optic Gaming team worked last year? I think that he is, because the Chicago Huntsmen are a much different team internally than the team over in Optic. And because, again, when you just look at the personalities on this roster, I think that you have more of a home style environment. And I know we're kind of going back to 4v4, so now you only have 3 voices to worry about. Right, you got Scump and Formal, T2Ps, familiar with Scump, right? Someone in Envoy is a great communicator, a young guy, sees the game the same way that Dashie does. Envoy is a very unselfish player, is willing to do what's best for the team, right? Obviously, he has his positional play. I mean, he plays the game a certain way, but he's unselfish, right? And so when you look at this team on paper together, I think I've said it before. You have T2P and you've got the young guns, right? You've got one of the greatest SMGs of all time in Scum, one of the greatest ARs of all time in Formal, now mixed along with one of the greatest young SMGs in the world in Envoy, and one of the greatest AR talents in the world currently in Dashie. So you kind of have this mixture of new and old. And again, when you look at teams like Dallas Empire last year, right? They managed to figure out the way to utilize the young guys and the veterans, right? Clayster and Crimsix, they're the ones driving the ship, and the young guys are the ones that are doing a lot of the key work, and they're learning from each other. They're meshing from each other. And that was important. Even when Draws and Hollow joined the Optic Gaming team, the biggest thing that Kenny talked on was they are teaching us things. And that is what I think you have to nail with this Huntsman lineup, is the ability for kind of both groups to work in sequence with each other. And I'm not acting like the Dallas Empire is the exact same team as this Huntsman lineup. I'm just saying the principles can be similar, right? And what I learned from talking to Rambo, what I learned from talking to Clay and Krim, the biggest thing was that the young guys, right, the young guys on this team, they were willing to receive harsh criticism because of how bad that they wanted to win. And I think that is going to be essential for this roster and the Huntsmen as well. Granted, I get they work differently. This isn't the Dallas Empire. This isn't the Optic Gaming team. I get that, right? But I think in terms of the way that this roster wants to work, if they do want to see that top echelon, they are going to have to work in that environment from time to time. And I think based on the characters or the personality types that you have with this roster, I do like it. I do. I think this is the right fit for Dashie here on the Chicago Huntsmen. I think this is the roster that he wants to be on. Clearly, he wanted to be on at the start of Modern Warfare. I think the Huntsmen have been wanting him for a long time. It was just a matter of getting him off of Optic. And I think for a short time, I was kind of under this debate of Optic. They want to keep Slasher. They want to keep Dashie, right? Those are kind of two fundamental pieces that you don't want to let go. You see the talent in one, you see the talent in the other. And obviously, and understandably so, they go the Slasher route. And so when you lose a player like Dashie, you're losing a lot, right? Because a lot of people are under the impression that we're going to see the Dashie from Modern Warfare. People forget how unbelievable this guy was at Black Ops 4, how unbelievable his talent really is. I mean, he is going to be a wonderful piece for the Huntsmen. Granted, I think they lose a major player in our cities, right? They lose a wonderful talent, a guy who can use pretty much any weapon on the map and be successful with it. But when you gain someone who has the untapped still talent in Dashie, I'll tell you what, that is one of the best pickups that they could have asked for, because again, you have a number of different talented players, but I think Dashie, he works with this team. I think from a skill standpoint, he is only going to increase this roster. And so I think from all accounts, I like this move. I think that it is the right fit. When you talk about personalities and stuff, I think all of that starts to mesh pretty well also. So again, in terms of Dashie, I think a lot of people have forgotten the skill that he has. A lot of people have forgotten the amount of talent that he possesses and the aiming potential that he has as well. When we talk about his performance on certain maps, I mean, just the way that he can play, it's unbelievable, right? And after a slow season in Modern Warfare, it's easy to instantly start to associate and say, oh, well, he had a bad performance, didn't play at Champs. He technically got to play one map at Champs, right? But I think when we talk about this team in particular, this is the roster that both parties wanted to have, right? If you are the Huntsman, you're looking at this guy. If you're Dashie, this was the team that you circled from the start. This is the roster that you wanted to go to, and you're granted that. So when we're looking at the future of Cold War, which again, we don't know the meta, we don't know all of those details. We've only gotten to kind of get a brief little experience of the game. I think that if you are the Huntsman, you are happy looking forward. I think you're in a better state than you were last season, because the biggest issue that the Chicago roster had coming into Modern Warfare, for me at least, was too many voices. I think that you are no longer in a situation where that becomes a problem. I think you have enough voices to the point where this team can function properly. Granted, you lose Aristides, who was a great in-game leader, I think, for this team, but you have someone in Envoy who can communicate. Dashie's unbelievably talented. Formal likes to be vocal as well, and Scump can be from time to time. So I think from all accounts, this, for me, is the Chicago Huntsmen lineup that I've been waiting for. And I think this is the team that is going to get them over the edge, the roster that they think that actually can get them to a championship. And with the amount of talent that you have on this team, when we talk about veterans in comparison to young guys, I think this is going to be a scary group for the future. Not understating, by the way, the possible future duo that we could see in Envoy and Dashie. Because again, these two guys together, I could probably make a separate video on this. These two guys together, I think, could be a dominant force for the future if they were to stay together. Again, both very talented. I think Envoy can complement Dashie very, very well. They'll be playing alongside each other pretty much in terms of the map based on the positioning. And I think that Envoy can maybe be everything that Dashie needs in a teammate, in terms of someone who sees the game the same way, someone who can communicate the game properly, and someone who can maybe pick up in some cases from the communication standpoint that Dashie needs as well. So I believe that Dashie is the right fit for the Chicago Huntsmen. I'm very excited to see this roster moving forward, and I think this is the move that we have been waiting for a long time, and I look forward to seeing whether or not it is going to deliver on what has been a year in the making.